And another viral thing that took over my Twitter timeline last week was what happened to a company called Tailwind Labs, and this is a bit more complicated. So if you don't know what
Yeah.
Tailwind is, it's essentially like a front-end library for modern web apps and websites. And it's probably used by most newly created websites, but it has become increasingly popular with AI. Like if you download Cloud Code and like try playing with it and basically just like create a basic like web app, it will for sure use Tailwind because it's just a set of reasonable defaults and like graphic components that provide like allows you to create like a nice looking web app while actually focusing on what it does and not necessarily how it looks. So the problem is that the company actually doesn't really make any money on Talent itself. It's free to use. And previously, their entire strategy was, hey, people discover us, people go to our docs, and then they can figure out that we're actually making paid UI kits and modules and components that you can buy from them. And that's how they were making their entire revenue, basically. The problem is that AI doesn't really need those components. What AI needs is just the basic documentation to create those components themselves. And so what happened is the company lost 75% of its revenue and had to fire essentially 3 out of 4 of its developers. What really changed everything was when the founder, Adam, recorded a short podcast explaining the situation. And I think what really pushed a lot of people over is that he wasn't complaining about this happening. I mean, he actually uses Gen AI tools himself in like his work and like to develop Tailwind. And he basically just stated the situation and explained that he's now committed to figuring out their new business models because they only have 6 months to live. I think that's what won most people over, is because he was extremely authentic, right? So like we've been talking about this before, that hopefully the age of rate baiting is over and now people value authenticity. And I think this is exactly what happened here. And after this story has gone viral on Twitter. A bunch of organizations have committed to sponsoring them. So like Google AI Studio, Vercel, and all the others essentially pushed them to 2 million in annual revenue. So now they definitely have a bunch of time to figure out this new business model. And I think, like, if we can quote Lulu once again, she has a quote that people root for you when they think that you have less than you deserve. And again, if we're thinking about companies like Cluely, the reason why a lot of people are angry at them is because everybody believes they've got more than they deserved and they should have less. And this is the exact opposite of the situation because it's a free open source project that's now powers most of the newly created websites. And then because of AI, it can earn enough money just to survive. And this also, of course, like plays into the confirmation bias for a lot of people. Like, look, AI is killing this like nice little thing. And again, I just want to stress that even like the founder himself, he doesn't say that like AI is bad. He basically just said, look, I'm not going to build features that allow AI to write better Tailwind code just because we need to figure out the business model first. But then he's actually open to this. Tailwind basically created an authentic viral moment without ever trying. And I mean, that's what makes it authentic, right? That's literally the definition of it. And in like sort of like the VC startup world, there's a saying that if you ask for money, you get advice, but if you ask for advice, you get money. And again, this is exactly what happened here. The founder went direct. It was authentic. And on the back of his story, he was able to basically do a turnaround for his entire company, his entire projects. And in the meantime, actually introduced a lot of people to what they were building in the first place, because I've seen a lot of people just committing, hey, I want to buy these components, or like I want to subscribe to them personally because, yeah, maybe like I have like less money than Google, of course. But I love the product so much, I'm ready to pay for this.
So I saw this story, and at first I didn't really understand it because it's a little more technical than I am. But what I understood was that authenticity coming out in the story, right? I think it was a very unguarded moment that the CEO had on this like random podcast. And I don't even think that when he was went into it that he was prepared to like answer the question. And it seems like, the podcast host was like, oh, let's talk about this. And then he kind of was just like, well, I'm just going to be open and honest about like what's actually happening, why we had to do the layoffs. I'm sure it was like really hard for them to have to let all those people go. So he answered like from the heart and like authentically. And that's kind of what came across. And I think people were able to like empathize with him because it was like never a thing of him like like the business failing because the product wasn't good. And I think this happens to a lot of founders, right? Where it's like sometimes what they're trying to charge people for is not the thing that people actually want to pay for, right? And so it took them going through this moment for them to figure out, like, okay, clearly this isn't what the product needs to be. We need to like focus on changing that. And I think sometimes when you're in it, it's really hard to make that decision because what is that? A sunk cost, right? You already think, we're already doing this. Let's figure it out. Let's try it. And sometimes you just kind of have to like nip it in the bud. And that's kind of what happened here, except it was forced on him, right? They had to let people go. He did the podcast, and now people and their supporters were coming out and, wanting to pay them, like, take my money. We want this to survive, right? And it wasn't even a call for help, right? Like, he wasn't asking people to like invest in him or to like raise that money. It just became a consequence of him putting himself out there. So I thought that was like really cool.
Yeah, exactly. And I think if he actually asked for money in the first place, I think maybe they would get some sponsors, but definitely way fewer because like the virality of the story, I think, was essentially the function for all of this to happen. Basically, the idea is like the project is important enough that some corporations will just literally give it money for it to survive and exist. Because like, for instance, Vercel, it's all about this specific kind of like web apps that
Hmm.
are just like very compatible with like Tailwind and sort of like all the other like usual components of the web stack. So a lot of people on Twitter were even thinking, okay, like Vercel will probably just buy them out. Like that didn't happen, at least yet. But it's sort of like a very natural thing to do in open source. Like it's how, like Microsoft sponsors Linux and all the others. You have
Mm.
various tiers and just like do all of this. And yeah, but yeah, I think
It's funny. It reminds me of that
Mhm.
meme of like the whole internet works based off this little project that one,
Yeah.
developer is like keeping in like Minnesota or whatever.
Exactly. And the thing is like for like the modern web, like Tailwind was that project because like so like
Mm,
for all the apps that actually built for like myself and our company in like Cloud Code and like with other tools, they all use Tailwind. But the problem is like they're just like not making any money at this because they never expected this reality to happen. And I definitely think it took a lot of like bravery on his side because if he just waited for like the next 6 months and then just issued a postmortem, well, I mean that would be like too
mhm.
little too late. The fact that
Right.
he actually like was able to do this right now, it what made the Insecure the turnaround for the company.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was one of those like feel good stories of like tech kind of rallying around this company and helping it out, right? Like it also goes to show how talking through the problem itself can also be like part of the journey, right? I mean, we hear so much about like the whole build in public, but a lot of that is like you're kind of just raving about it, your company doing well, like how much we raise, like how much, we're making in ARR. It kind of reminds me of what you were saying earlier about Cluely, right? Like they were super loud and proud when they, had raised the 15 million from Andreessen Horowitz. And then when they showed the chart of them growing, saying, "Oh, we're going to post this every month," and then slowly it started dying down, and people were like, "Well, what happened to all this authenticity and openness that you were going to have?" And it just kind of shows that a lot of tech companies just kind of keep the problems to themselves until it's too late. Right. Until it's either, oh, we have to lay off all these people, we have to pivot, or we just have to close down entirely. When if they had kind of, talked through the problem, maybe other people that are going through the same problem can talk about it with them and, like this, kind of figure out like what's going on. But then also it goes to show that like if you are beloved, if you are a beloved product like that, and you do have fans, that your fans are going to come out for you, right? Like that's the whole point of building a community that loves you and loves your product is that they do want to support you. They oftentimes just don't even know what's happening, right? Like unless you tell them.
Exactly, because I mean, yeah, everybody is a gangster while they're growing 3 times every month. But the problem is like, what happens if you don't really have this?
Mhm,
And like, it's much easier to build in public when you're very successful. But
mhm.
this is a great example that it actually can bring you a lot of value even when times are tough.